In fact, yesterday, so I had 20 minutes and suppose 20 minutes. So yesterday I talked about interrogating inclusive growth, that is critiquing inclusive growth, raising questions, but that is from the perspective of agriculture. So today I will be actually talking about same aspect, critiquing inclusive growth from a different perspective. The perspective is different. So basic idea is that we know informal sector is omnivalent, is kind of omnipresent. It's everywhere nowadays, and in the global south, especially in India. The general perception is that once India grows, and it is growing, we know, once India grows, we will be relieved of this informal sector. So, menace of informal sector will be over. Now, I raise the question at this moment, at this point, that whether the presence of the informal sector is a weakness of capitalism or growth process, or it's an outcome of this growth process. And through that, I will be interrogating the very idea of inclusive growth at the end of the presentation. So whether it's lack of growth or because of growth itself. So next slide. And the dominant discourses, if we look at next. I'm sorry. Yes. So what we know from dominant discourses, that dominant discourses across the globe proposes that a variety of discourses actually propose that once there is growth, either informal sector or unorganized sector, as we call it in our country more frequently, will be incorporated within the formal sector through some institutional measures. Obviously, these are needed as supplementary or complementary measures, institutional changes, regulations, etc. But with growth, it will vanish. So we are in a way of informal sector, or informal sector will improve, develop, it will grow, it will remain outside the formal sector or organized sector, but it will grow, it will develop. So growth is the panacea. We have to just wait and watch. That is the understanding across the globe in one way or the other. Of course, there are many people who talk about growth plus a variety of institutional arrangements and changes like property right structure, regulations, etc. Who knows? So actually we'll be looking at this problem of informal sector of India exactly as a critic of this idea. Next slide, please. We know this is a very famous article from Journal of Economic Perspectives, sometime in 2014, very famous Laporta and Slafer. And they are showing exactly this story that across the globe, when you have along the abscissa you have per capita income, and along the ordinate you have prevalence of the unorganized or informal sector. So they are showing exactly that thing, that when growth is there is reduction in the prevalence of informality. And what is happening in India is that old data, but we have taken a long 10 period, 10-year period, that is 1999 2000, 10 to 11. During that period, we know that India grew very fast. This is the growth period. It's a kind of shining period for India. And what happened during this period? Next, please. That rural and urban informal sector expanded across the whole of India substantially with growth. It is expanding. So the first theory, or first proposition that growth will wither away, the problem of informality will be resolved may not be taking place here, or something else is happening now. Next slide, please. Next, please. Next. sorry, I'm here. Oh, no. Sorry, no.
Back.
Sorry, yes, this is fine. So what is happening here, if you look at this slide, it is once again the same thing across the axis. We have arranged the states in terms of per capita income, and over time, 2 periods of time, it's pooled data. We are seeing that informal sector as a share of population is also rising. So it's not population as such, because there is a very big theoretical perspective that it's all because of population. Population is a contributing factor, but not all. Something else is happening. So when we have growth, we have more of income. It's just opposite to the Laporta and Slater diagram, where we have, according to along the x-axis, per capita income, and y-axis, reduction in informality. Here it's rising. Next slide, please. And what is important, we know this, that people are as the same diagram along the axis of per capita income over time. So what is happening as a share of population or as a share of workforce, people are coming out of agriculture and moving into informal sector. Nothing new. It's like Aristotle. But the argument, counter argument is that it's good because people are moving out of frying pan or fire and they are going to, or frying pan or fire, whatever you call it, but they are better off. They are moving to informal sector, they are better off. It is like waiting hall. We call informal sector in some literature as waiting hall towards formality. So it's good. Why are you worried or why are you shouting? So, but problem is that with growth it is happening. Is it just like Aristotle or something else? Next slide please. To understand the peculiarity, just pick up. And you can do this with any data set. It's secondary data in SSO. And you can do this with any data set. Recent 2015 that data set as well. Similar result. I have been working on this for quite some time now. Okay, so I am dividing, as many of us do, work with the informal sector, dividing informal sector across establishment and self-employment. You know, self-employment means the tiny ones, and establishments are those unorganized or informal units who hire work. So let us divide the informal sector and go deeper. What is happening in the informal sector? So till this point, what we have got with growth in India, informal sector is growing and population may be contributing, but it's not the most important factor. Something else might be happening here with growth. So yes, and self-employment is very large. An establishment, that is firms hiring labor, is small, a very small section. Roughly, if you look at informal sector, it's 85-15 kind of distribution. So obviously our focus will be on self-employment. So next slide please. We take the GIS map and this kind of, next slide please. Next slide. I'm sorry. Yes. So actually this is India, you know, and darker the map, darker the higher the per capita income. It's obvious, we know from the map. And the bars are actually labor productivity. There are 4 bars. The first one is self-employment labor productivity, then establishment, the blue ones. We know 1 to 5 workers, firms hiring 1 to 5 workers, and firms hiring 6 to 20 workers, and then formal manufacturing. Major Indian states, we have taken data from 94, 95. Next slide please. Next. What will happen to these labor activities after 10 years? And let us focus on 4. All it will be clumsy. Please be very careful. Focus on these 4 subjects. So these are the productivities, labor productivities in the first three parts of informal sector or unorganized manufacturing to be precise, and then the formal sector. And as you are hiring more and more labor, your productivity is more. And formal sector, because of many reasons, very high productivity. Average organized manufacturing productivity. Next slide, please. Yes, what is happening? Could you please go to the previous one once? Yes, once again, please. Next slide. Yes. So formal sector productivity is manifold, jumps, boom, in 10 years, with not much for the informal sector. So what is happening? Informal sector is expanding in terms of its volume, but not in terms of productivity. So the first question, so far as inclusive growth is concerned, the inequality between the formal sector and especially self-employment is emerging, is expanding. But people might think that, oh, it's true for all of the informal sector. So next slide, please. So we are not focusing on formal sector now. It's three parts of the informal unorganized manufacturing. Once again, 94, 95. Next, please. So, I'm sorry. Yes. So this is the first one. What will happen once again after 10 years, so far as productivity is concerned? Next. Once again, we find a difference within the informal sector. So let us be very simple. Informal sector is expanding with growth. First, within informal sector, inequality is expanding. More importantly, formal, informal inequality is expanding. So far as, if you go in terms of any indicator, capital labor ratio, labor productivity, whatever general characteristic, whatever general variable you take, you will find this kind of divergence. Next slide, please. So this is actually, it's the same thing. I think we can skip, this time is short. Next slide. Same thing we are actually. This is self-employment, productivity is falling. That is manufacturing, this is services. Actually, self-employment productivity is falling in many of the major states. Self-employment manufacturing, self-employment services, we have falling labor productivity over the period where we had liberalization, etc. and high growth. Next slide, please. So what we are having is this. So as economy grows, sectoral volume of the informal sector expands. As the economy grows, labor productivity improves in the modern informal sector, that is the larger, that is the establishment, hiring labor. And as economy grows, labor productivity either deteriorates or at least stagnates in the petty, that is self-employment, based informal sector. So there is a dichotomy, divergence, there is no inclusion, unfortunately. So once again, growth is happening, size of informal sector is expanding, there is growing fissure, growing gap, growing dualism within the informal sector and across formal and informal sector. Exactly that is the data, whichever way you can look at this, and I have been doing this for last more than 50 years actually. Okay, I have tried to look at whatever possible ways. Next slide, please. So what is happening? We are trying to propose a different theory. It's not Aristotle. So it's like this. I will stop actually because it's 15 minutes, just 15 minutes. So it's a kind of situation. It's a macro economy. It's a model, actually mathematical model. I am not going into that. There are papers. You can go to websites and you can get those papers. And there is 2000 old book, new book. Yeah. What the kind of story that we are going to tell, it's a parable. Any theory is a parable. We know it's a parable. So Aristotle told us a parable that when formal sector grows, the modern sector wage increases, and that acts as a kind of attraction for the rural people who move out of agriculture and try to go to the formal sector, but in between they are stuck up. They are placed in limbo, they are hanging in limbo, and they are put in informal sector. We are telling, and that is a demand-driven story. From the demand side, the misperceived worker, because of misperception, lack of knowledge, lack of information, I am going, but I am not getting the job. And I am waiting in the informal sector, and informal sector is my waiting hall to be engaged sometime in future in the formal sector.
Unfortunately, it is not happening in India, especially for the 85% of the self-employed. And I would request you, if necessary, you can go to my book as well, where the Oxford University Press 2016. But this is a bit old, the new ones are coming up maybe. But, and there are many other people who are working in this area. I'm not at all doing something very special. So what is happening? What is the story I'm trying to tell? It's a different side, from the opposite side. And I'm taking from the geographer, David Harvey, the famous concept, accumulation by disposition. So what is happening? And remember, with growth, this informal sector is expanding and there is increasing dualism. Instead of eradication of dualism as propounded by Lewis, it is actually intensification and extension of dualism. So when growth is taking place, resources are being gobbled up by the formal sector, which is growing very fast with very high productivity. The urbanization is taking place, infrastructural development is taking place, and it all, and very high order industrialization is taking place across the global south and in India as well. And that's why we had that, during the growth period, we had that increasingly dominant prevalence of informality. Dispossession is taking place. So capital, the modern sector is gobbling up the resources, evicting people, population, but the population is not being incorporated into the growth process. It's not the old-fashioned general equilibrium that is happening. That is, now I am taking the resources, growing. For the moment you are unemployed, but when growth takes up, when there is takeoff, the unemployed people will be, in future, will be absorbed. So this is not taking place. What is happening is something like this, that the growth process is taking place in the formal sector, and there is the larger informal units, the better off informal units, who are actually linked with the formal sector. So they are also benefiting. We see in our cities informal sector, and we see that they are growing, and we know the rural informal sector is much larger and it's in a very bad situation. So what I am trying to say through our story is that when modern sector is expanding, people are getting out of agriculture, pushed out of agriculture. A small part of that population is being pulled into the modern part of the informal sector, the growing part of the informal sector. But a very large part is thrown out and they have no other option but to get engaged in, it's kind of push, engaged in the self-employment sector, in the worst off part of the informal sector. So that's why the dualism is increasing. That is my humble admission. So actually after this I cannot show, we have done some econometric analysis as well with unit level data, because these were all state level data. Because we know informal sector and unorganized manufacturing and unorganized services, we have farm level data. So we have farm level data, we have done some analysis, and here we had some presentation where we have tabular, we have done some tables and empirical analysis through which we are showing the same story. So it's basically, once again, when growth is taking place, first of all there is dispossession. People are getting evicted from the old professions, we call it in Lewisian language the traditional sector. They are moving out, they are pushed out. But only a part of this is getting engaged in the modern part of the informal sector, very small in the formal sector, a little larger part in the modern part of the informal sector, the better of informal sector. A very large section of these people who are evicted have no other option but to get engaged in the worse off part, the self-employment part. And that's why we are having, instead of the Lewisian story of abolition of dualism, a kind of deepening dualism. Dualism is actually being reinforced in India, and what we are seeing is only a part of India that is shining, and the rest of India, the scenario is not so good.
That is my humble suggestion. Thank you. Unfortunately, I don't have time. Okay. These are the, if question comes, I think I can discuss this, relations, etc. So it's basically a critique of, and that's why it's a critique of this inclusive growth process. That the growth is not being inclusive, rather it's becoming exclusive. Thank you.